Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
There will be 2 stories in this video, each one worth listening to.
A setup with a partner swap? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy it! I looked at my wife of 5 years and said, "Erin, it's him or me. No intermediate options." She sits next to my nominal boss, Plato Giannis, and holds his well-manicured hand until I speak. Then she took her hand away, an expression of confusion and fear appearing on her beautiful face. She shook her head in surprise, causing her blonde hair to glisten in the lamplight. "Just for the weekend. On Monday, everything will be back to normal. Can't you have some fun with Elle for now?" Elle is La Logan, real name Ellen Johnson. She sits next to me and has been making very intense attempts to seduce me for the last few hours. She is a stunning woman with luxurious dark hair and one of the best bodies in the world, especially if you like curves, which I definitely do. There are also rumors that she is top class. This is all part of Plato's joke. When Erin and I were invited to this island for a weekend, it was assumed that he just wanted to get to know me better. I am a famous author, and he bought the corporation that published my work. This happened about 3 months ago. But in fact, the whole weekend was organized so that Plato could have a knitmate with my wife. I am an average writer, author of detective novels and thrillers. My hero is Rick Rocker. Sometimes he solves the mysteries of locked rooms, and sometimes he dives off a cliff to escape crazy people. He also has a varied and interesting intimate life, putting beautiful women to bed in no time. He is a martial arts expert and trained assassin, all in all, a jack of all trades. He is fantasy wrapped in a thin layer of reality, and the books sell well. But the publishing house has several more important and better-selling writers. I just have a beautiful wife who attracted Plato. They met at a gala dinner and danced that Plato, Mr. G, threw for his stable of writers and editors. The party was impressive, and Erin was especially impressed when she and Mr. G danced to several musical numbers. He is polished, 10 years older than 28-year-old Erin. He has long dark hair and is a large man. As I watched them dance, I saw that he also moved deftly. When the group took a break, they both returned to our table, and Mr. G said, "You have a wonderful wife, Donald, and she danced beautifully." I nodded. The lack of response from me seemed to stump him for a second. Then he said, "Well, it's time for me to take care of the other guests." "It was a pleasure, madam." Erin smiled and replied, mutually, "PL." I looked at her. No doubt she moved too quickly from Mr. G to Plato. I asked, impressed with my boss, "Oh yeah, he's just adorable," and she gave me a lecherous grin. "Well, let's see whose wife he snags next, huh?" She turned out to be the wife of one of the editors, and during the evening, 3 more. All this happened a month ago. My name is Donald Lake. There is no nickname. I'm about 6 feet tall, weighing 169 pounds, with curly brown hair and blue eyes. I'm 30 years old. I am in good physical shape and athletic. Erin is also in good shape. She practices fencing. It is a sport of skill and coordination, and it was there that I met her at a fencing lesson that she taught. I was doing the usual research for Rick, who was supposed to be fighting with swords in the next book. In the book, The Adventurer. I always do extensive research before writing an adventure book. This is one of my main selling points. Rick doesn't do anything that I haven't tried. I made my way to becoming a writer up a steep staircase. I graduated from high school and did not continue formal education. Even then, and in fact, since I was 10, I realized that I was a writer. Throughout school, I wrote story after story. 2 stories I wrote in high school were published, albeit in obscure literary magazines. I considered myself a serious writer until I had to work for a living. After finishing school, I worked as a car mechanic, and I liked it, but it didn't pay that much. I started writing thrillers, and miracle of miracles, one of them sold. Then another one, and another. My current publisher signed me after I sent them my first Rick Rocker novel. They gave me an editor, Sally Baker. We immediately found a common language with her. She is a sweetheart but deeply married. She had children in elementary school at the time. It was while working on the second Rocker book that I met Erin. I finished the book after receiving advice from her about a sword duel, and we went on several dates, which soon ended in bed. Everything in bed was fantastic, we hit it off right away, and I know that both of us were delighted with it. When we met, Erin was working in her own music store. She is not a rich woman and was able to survive the initial stages of starting a business thanks to loans from a family trust. In one section of the store, all kinds of instruments were sold, and in the other, there were recordings of music of all kinds and sheet music. So, fencing is just a hobby. When we got married, she was 23 years old, and I was as happy as I thought it was possible to be happy. We had plans for children very soon, but my publishing house was sold to Mr. G, or Plato as Erin says. One day, Erin came home excited. "Donnie, next weekend Plato invites us to his island," she said. I stared at her. "You mean Mr. G? How, more precisely? Why are you telling me this and not him?" "Oh, I ran into him last week. We had lunch, then I gave him a tour of the store. Today he called with an invitation. He says he wants to get to know the writers better. I'm sure he will be in contact with you soon. But my question is, has he been in contact with you? And how many of you has he been in contact with?" She turned slightly pale. "Nothing like that happened, Donnie. You're paranoid." "No, not paranoia. Tell me, why didn't you mention lunch and shopping until today? This was last week, right?" She turned away. "Okay, Donald. He kind of hit on me. I blew him off, but I didn't say anything because I thought you'd get in trouble. He is the owner of the company, after all. And now you seem delighted with the idea of visiting him on the island. I've heard about this place. How many more people will be there?" "Just you and me. He has a special friend who will be there too. Well, and the staff, of course. All in order to get to know you better. It seems to me that this is in order to get to know you all, of you. How touching. I can handle this. Are you sure you can handle it? Stop it. It will be great, you'll see. I'm going to decline the invitation, Erin. It's too dangerous for us." "Oh, Donnie, no, please. We will have fun." Sorry, she sulked for the rest of the evening. The next day, I called the main office and asked for Mr. G to speak, and he called me back 15 minutes later, saying, "Hello, Donald. Looking forward to our weekend on the island." "I refuse, Mr. G. I don't feel comfortable. It seems my wife knew about it but not me. In fact, I think she had lunch with you, but she didn't tell me about it. She said that you were pestering her, and she was afraid that I would react badly if I told everything to me. And she's right, Donald. I actually appreciate Erin on several different levels. She is very attractive, but I can ignore it. She is an entrepreneur like me, and you are one of my most profitable writers. I just want to get to know you both better. Sorry, Mr. G, it will not work. It's a shame that you feel that way, Donald. I wish you would change your mind. I'll keep the weekend open." At this point, we separated. About 3 hours later, as I was finishing the next Rick book, I got a call from my agent, Brock Levon. "Don, you declined Mr. G's invitation." "Why? How do you even know about this?" "Brock, the vice president of sales, called me. He insists that you should go, otherwise, they may under-advertise the new book, which will cost you dearly. And me, since we both live from interest." "Did he threaten this?" "Not directly, but the threat was made. This guy plays a tough game. I said I'll contact you, Brock." After hanging up, I emailed Sally the end of the new book with some instructions. Later, she called, and we discussed everything. In the meantime, I studied Plato Janus and his island very intensively. The island was called Hedonism. In Greek, it means pleasure. Pleasure Island. As I delved deeper, I found several stories of intimate outrage on the island, and there was mention of 2 cases of divorce where the island was mentioned as the basis. But these stories were published in gossip. There were several photographs of Mr. G with women. 2 of them were married. All this alarmed me. I found a picture of this place on Google Maps. I got acquainted with the whole place. The island is 2 miles long and about 1 mile wide, located off the coast of North Carolina amongst several islands where people go to play golf and enjoy beach holidays. The island faces south and is sheltered from the elements. It has 2 piers and several buildings, including a large house. There are tennis courts and a swimming pool. Why have a pool if there are great beaches? I downloaded detailed photographs of this place and compiled them into a topographic map. It seemed to me that to get there and back, you would need a decent boat or seaplane. I have neither one nor the other, but I know people who have both. That evening, Friday, Erin returned home on time. Entering the house, she looked joyful. For dinner, I had a large chicken salad and white wine. She got up to change her clothes. While they were eating, Erin said, "I heard that you may have changed your mind about not going to the island." I looked at her. "Where?" "PLO said that you can change your mind at lunch." "No, silly. He's in New York, and we're here in good old Virginia. He called me. He has an apartment in Milan." "How do you know he's in New York?" "Don't turn your paranoia on me, Donnie. He mentioned this. He said that if we agreed, he would order his plane to take us from the national airport. But we won't agree, Erin. I haven't changed my mind." "Crap, Donald, Lake, you are so stubborn," Erin said. "Erin, you can go. I won't be able to have a good time there because I'll worry that we'll end up getting divorced. Are you going to sleep with him?" "I won't go without you, Don." "How can you?" "If I go alone, anything can happen, and it will happen. When you return, we will never sleep together again." "Donnie, I can't say I'm not attracted to him, but you and I are still hotter than ever, so I wouldn't take that risk." "I won't, so I believed you." "Do you believe it?" "Don't believe me at all." Now is the time when my trust tank is almost empty. She quickly got up from the table, spilling the wine. "Crap, look what you made me do." I started laughing at her. She realized how stupid that sounded and joined me. This turned into hugs and kisses, which led to a trip upstairs. It took a whole hour. The unpleasant topic receded as we lay in bed. Erin said, "I won't risk this for some billionaire, I swear." I noted that she seemed to assume that we would go to the island after all. Otherwise, what risk is she talking about? And said, "Okay, then it's decided." She tensed, but she didn't say anything. I asked, "Why are you so eager to go on this trip?" "Only the truth, not." She didn't answer for quite some time. Then she said, "It seems exciting to be with such an important and influential guy." "Sorry, I didn't mean with, but only communicate, and I studied it. He was born rich. Of course, he made a lot more money himself, but he had a huge head start, and he chases women just like you." "Okay, well, I still believe that everything will be good and fun." I thought about it. We were ready to start trying to have children. If Erin was going to stray, now would be the time for her to do it. And if so, I thought I would like to find out about it now and not when we have children. I used to love her. She is smart, lively, and damn hot. But it also had to be truthful, and now I doubted that. "Okay, Erin, we can go. But I warn you, if we end up under this guy, we're screwed. There will be no turning back. Understand?" "Yes, I understand. I'm so glad we can do this." I decided that the warning I had just given was the last. Either she is a worthy wife, or she is not. Temptation will become a test. Time will show. The next day, I accepted the invitation and made contingency arrangements with my friend. I also checked the availability of cellular communications on the island. It's there, but just in case, I took my satellite phone with me. The small plane we flew in from National landed at a small airport where we were met by a black man named Simon. He took us to the pier where we boarded a boat with a nice cabin and a powerful engine. The boat was driven by another guy, Charlie, and after about 40 minutes, we docked at the island. Erin and I spent time looking at the ocean and other islands. Simon told us where we were and outlined what there was to do on the island. He is a nice guy, bigger than me and muscular. He has a wonderful smile and laugh. As they approached the pier on the north side of the island, Aaron was in front, and Simon said, "You don't seem very happy with the trip, Mr. Lake." "Call me Don." "I have doubts." "How long have you been working on the island?" 6 years, to Mr. G. "Therefore, I expect you to know why I have doubts." "Then why did you come if you're that worried?" "To see what happens." "You're also his bodyguard, aren't you?" "Yes, in case something happens." "Well, he's a big guy. I'm sure he can take care of himself." "Yes, you could say I'm here just in case." "Once or twice, things didn't go well, but in those days, I was not needed. Looking at you, maybe I'll be ready. I value my work." "Are you armed?" "No, well, I have a knife, but knives are everywhere." "Are there guns on the island?" "No, not allowed." "I assume it's in the memo you received." "Yeah, but I don't really trust her. I'm not a very trusting guy these days." "No firearms, I warn you." "You won't need it. No matter what happens." The boat was pressed tightly against the pier, and Simon and the young man on the pier tied it up. Simon gave Aaron his hand, and I jumped off the boat. Simon looked slightly worried about this. I accompanied Aaron towards the big house as Simon had indicated. Mr. G met us when we arrived at the house. He was dressed casually, wearing swimming trunks and a sleeveless shirt. With him was Elle, the most beautiful woman in the world. I looked at her as I found out who else would be there with us. That's how I found out that she was actually Helen Johnson from Jonestown. She was the semi-official mistress on the island, as well as in several houses owned by Mr. G. There was a time when she could be seen in the company of other noble men, not so often anymore. Mr. G appears to have received an exclusive agreement, at least in some way. Mr. G extended his hand to shake, and Elle hugged Aaron. G then hugged Aaron and Elle hugged me. She smelled and felt great during the hug. Her lips touched my ear. We were taken to a large room and offered drinks. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had a light snack on the plane, but a small buffet was laid out for us. I gave up drinking and took sparkling water. Aaron took the wine. They both ate a small amount of food from the buffet. While we were doing this, Mr. G asked me about the new book. I sent it to Sally last week. I think it's on time. Oh yeah, I know you're always on time, Donald, sometimes even earlier, he smiled. Ella asked, what are you speaking about? I've read your books. It's a thriller with rock climbing and flying small planes and a love interest, Elle exclaimed. I cannot wait. Maybe I can watch it sooner, Mr. G supported. We'll see, dear, and turned to Aaron, my dear, how are things in the music business? Everything is fine. Maybe I should have said crescendo, there was some giggling. I said, I think Marjorie's new book will sell well. Marjorie is Marjorie Wright, who wrote serious fiction but still sold a lot of books. Yes, she is moving up our sales list. But, Donald, she is far from you and Morgan. Morgan, who goes by the name Belle Starling, is a romance novelist. She is the #1 salesperson in our company. Morgan just bakes them, I said mockingly. Mr. G laughed, it is to my advantage. I looked at your contract last week. You owe us another book. Yes, this is true. I think about Christmas, 9 months, but work on it is already in full swing, Elle said. Are you changing topics? Yes, sometimes thrillers need a rest. Then I switched. The next book is The Mystery of an English Village. I researched this when we were there last summer, Elle said. Plato spoke very flatteringly about your sales. Each book sells better than the previous one, Aaron chimed in. It gathers a readership for our future. My store makes normal profits, Elle said. But do you have family money? Yes, I have them. So far after the store started working, I didn't touch them, Mr. G jumped up. If you finish lunch, let's go for a swim, and he ran out the door. Elle said, if you have swimsuits, I will show you to your room, and you can change. The three of us stood up, and Ella led us into a large double bedroom. She closed the door. We changed into swimsuits. I had regular swimming trunks, but Aaron wore a skimpy pink bikini. This is too much, huh? Who are you trying to impress? I just want to look good. Elle is so beautiful, no more than you, dear. She didn't like my tone, but she held her tongue. When we came down, Elle was wearing an electric blue bikini just as small as Erin's. I was completely in love with both. We got out and walked to the beach on the south side of the island. There was a wooden path. Mr. G was already in the water, swimming behind the breakwaters. Erin said, "I don't want to swim that far." "Me too," Ella shuddered as she said this. I dove into the surf, surfaced, and swam to where Mr. G was cutting through the water with his crawl. I joined him. He was a good swimmer for a man of his size, but my body type was more suitable for water, and I easily kept up with him, sometimes changing strokes. I kept swimming until he got tired. He headed back, and I followed him. When we swam to the shore, a large wave knocked him off his feet. I walked up to him and picked him up. He spat out seawater and sand. I held him tightly, and we walked out. I saw that his legs were like wet noodles, probably because he had overextended himself in a swimming competition with me. But he quickly came to his senses and pulled away from my help. "I'm fine." This wave just took me by surprise. We approached the women lying on sun loungers in the sun, and I asked, "Who wants to swim?" Ella stood up immediately. She raised her hand, causing her top to slip slightly, and she ran to the surf. I looked at Erin. She shook her head. Then I ran after Elle. The view from the rear was impressive. She dove into the surf like an Olympian and swam out beyond the breakwaters. I followed her. She swam better than Mr. G. I was amazed by this. We swam next to each other for some distance, and she shouted, "Let's turn," which is what I did. The flash of flesh interested me. I let her get about 4 meters ahead of me and watched her from the side. She turned over and floated on her back, her breasts swayed in and out of the water. She was an absolutely amazing woman. Backstroke was my specialty, so I joined her, swimming alongside her. We swam some distance, and then she said, "I've had enough," and swam to the shore. I waited a moment to look at her from behind. When I emerged from the surf, Erin and Mr. G were nowhere to be seen, but Elle was looking straight at my tight-fitting swimming trunks. She said, "What are you, Superman?" I laughed. "There's only one way to find out." She took a step towards me, then she stopped, saying, "We can't do this here, no matter how much I want it." She turned and ran on land. She was not as fast as in water. I easily caught up with her, and we went out onto the veranda. Ours were nowhere to be seen. I wondered if this had already happened. Elle asked, "So, do you really do what you write?" "Yes. Well, I mean, I can't jump between buildings, but I'm trying to figure out how believable Rick can do such things." Elle stared at me. Before this look, my erection disappeared, but she returned as she expected. She was a woman with power. I said, "Elle, off. I am married to a wonderful woman and would like to keep it that way. I'm asking as a favor, don't." Elle laughed, a tongue-tied writer. "Oh my God." I said, "Let's see what these two are up to, shall we? Does this matter to you?" "Oh yeah, please. I want you to understand that I won't be sleeping with you this weekend, whatever Erin decides to do. If they get to that point, I'll leave, and most likely, I will long regret what I just said." I smiled. "I'm warning you, Donald, it's not easy to shake me off my tail." She entered the house. I waited a few minutes before following her. When I went upstairs to change clothes, I saw no one, but when I entered our room, the shower was already running. As soon as I heard it, it stopped. No votes. Erin opened the door, wrapped in a towel. She gasped when she saw me and asked, "Has Elle already got you?" "No, please understand, Erin, I'm not going with Elle. I hope you don't go with Mr. G either. We talked about this. The situation remains the same. What were you two doing while we were swimming?" He showed me the swimming pool, the tennis court, and downstairs is the gym. And no intim. I didn't believe that he could be, because it would be too risky. They had no idea how long Elle and I would be gone, and I was sure that they were watching us for some time while we were swimming. No, he was a gentleman. Great, but sooner or later, he will come for you, and you know it. Yes, and she will come for you. He has as much chance of getting me as she has of getting you, she grinned. This is not very comforting, but I won't, and you better not do that. Otherwise, what we already talked about. Nothing changed. Drinks and snacks at 5, we have time for love, and she dropped the towel. I admit I was still on edge because of Elle, so I attacked Erin with genuine zeal, and she reciprocated my feelings. When we finished, we realized that the windows were open. Erin said, "Well, never mind, after all, we are married." I looked out the window. Elle was sitting on a sun lounger about 6 meters away from us. She looked up and smiled, waved her hand, and then reached for her shorts. I moved away from the window. Erin noticed that I was hard again and stared at me, then she looked out the window. She stood spellbound for some time. There was a groan from outside. Erin turned to me again, saying, "Oh my God, Donnie, forget about yourself. She can have me. I can give up on you." "I will not give up," Erin laughed at me. "You have to beg her to give up, otherwise, you have no chance." "I've already done this. It doesn't seem to work. I guess Plato gave her a task so he can have me. It's all so strange, but you have to admit it keeps your interest." "Erin, I promise you that I won't do this, although now you have helped me a lot." She looked at me. I was still erect. "Certainly, we can have intim at least every 2 hours. This should help." Maybe we went down to the main room in casual clothes for me. It's Docker shorts and a collared shirt. Erin put on a dress and let her hair down and high-heeled sandals. No doubt she looked beautiful. When we arrived, Mr. G was drinking beer. He said, "Hey, Donald, how was your swim with Elle?" "It was great, Mr. G. She is a talented swimmer. This is just one of the many talents she has. Call me Plato." "Fine, famous name. I like it." He was a famous guy. My father, rest his soul, loved reading about him. Elle came in. She was also wearing a dress and high heels. The dress seemed modest, but on her, it was not modest. I'm sure Erin felt a little insecure, and as I understand it, it was part of the game. Ella had to outshine Erin, who in turn would try to assert herself by getting Plato for herself. I moved closer to Erin and put my arm around her shoulders. Plato said, "There's wine, cocktails, beer, and some pretzels. Pretzels are my favorite." As he said this, he was eating one of them. The 4 of us chatted for a while. Ella then took me to show the house. It was impressive. The gym has excellent equipment. I asked, "Does Plato use this?" "He lifts weights." She pointed to the bench where the barbell was installed, heavy. I slid onto the bench under the barbell. B carefully removed it from the racks and made 5 swings, and then he put it back. Elle stood right above me, staring as best she could, and then she said, "He only makes 3, then he rests." She began to breathe heavily. I lifted the barbell and did 8 more reps, then he put her in her place, saying, "Everyone has their own strengths, and you have so many of them. Do you know what my role should be this weekend? Seduce me so Plato can take care of Erin." "Yes, this has happened before. I always complete a task, even if it is usually not very pleasant. But you'll be more than pleasant, I think." She gave me a killer smile. "If I start begging, will you stop?" I was actually serious when I said this, but she seemed to think I was joking. "No, but I will enjoy seeing you beg." She walked up the stairs. I waited for my erection to subside and stood up. The 3 of them huddled together in the living room and talked. When I entered, they fell silent, after which Plato said, "Have something to drink, Donald." "Beer, maybe?" I looked at the bar, walked over to it, took out a bottle of Corona, and opened it. The rest had wine. We chatted a little more, then I asked, "Have you finished discussing your plot, or should I leave?" This caused an awkward silence. Elise Lennell watched the other 2, mostly Erin. Erin looked at Plato and he said, "So, no secrets." At that moment, Simon came in and announced dinner. We went into the dining room where dishes were laid out on the buffet table. It was a family-style service. We sat at one end of a large table. They poured water, but I drank my beer and didn't drink water, breaking the conversation. He said, the tense situation I had created, and we chatted amicably about politics and baseball. Plato was a Yankees fan. Aaron and I rooted for the Orioles and Nationals. Elle liked the Pirates and was from Jonestown. Simon served dessert, tiramisu. I missed mine. Plato seemed to notice this. Don't eat dessert, great. I have to keep my waist in check. Bah, you have no fat in your body. I saw you when you were swimming. You don't drink water, only beer. Plato, as I already told my wife before we came here, my reservoir of trust is empty. Can you blame me? Aaron said, do you believe that they will pill you with something forbidden? This is just crazy. Don't be like that, Donald. I smiled and pushed Plato a glass of water and said, eat and drink, buddy. Plato sat with a stony face. Then he said, Simon, when Simon appeared. Plato said, please clear the table. Simon saw what happened to the arrangement of water and dessert. He picked up what was my glass of water and my uneaten tiramisu and carried them away. Elle said, let's go to the courtyard. There will be music, and we can dance. Aaron and Plato remained silent. I stood up and gave Elle my hand. I took her to the patio. When we got there, she turned to me. You really blamed him for the food and water. Do you actually believe that he will slip you something? And you, maybe? I wouldn't think so, but he took neither one nor the other and asked his boyfriend to take them away. The other two came out, and soft music started playing. I walked up to Aaron, took her by the elbow, and led her away from Plato and into the open area. We danced. She usually dances well, but at first, she was shy. Although then I relaxed, she pressed herself close to me and whispered in my ear, I love you, Donnie, always. I love you too, Aaron. We danced on. The music ended, and we sat down at a table with Plato and Elle. Then the music began again, and Elle stood up, extending her hand to me. She took me to the floor. We danced. I saw Plato dancing with Aaron. Elle may have been the world's best distraction with her sweet, subtle scent and the curves of her body. She put me into some kind of trance every time she worked on me. I was immediately delighted, and this time too. I saw Plato's hands on Aaron's butt, and I didn't see her pushing them away. I pulled away from Elle, walked the short distance to Aaron and Plato, and just stood there and looked at them. Aaron saw and tried to move away from Plato. He continued to keep his hands on her fifth place. She lightly pushed him on the chest and said, I don't want problems, Plato, let go. He let go, but he took her hand and led her back to the table. Ella came back after me, and we sat down. She was very close to me. Aaron held Plato's hand as they sat next to each other. Plato said, I'm very disappointed in you, Donald. Ella is a fantastic lover. She will give you one of the most powerful and delightful experiences of your life, and yet you are depriving her of this chance. I have a wife, no trading. This is how we came to what was discussed at the very beginning. I turned to Aaron and said, either he or I, no intermediate options. She removed her hand from his, but she looked at me and said, it's only for the weekend. On Monday, everything will be back to normal. Can't you have some fun with Elle for now? I looked at her closely. And you will do it, no kidding, yes or no, even if it means it's over between us? No, I don't understand why it should mean that, but I won't. I extended my hand to her, and she took it. I pulled her towards me and gave her the hottest kiss I could muster, running my hands up and down her body, and then I pulled away. Tears came to my eyes. I breathed out the words that nearly killed me. The very fact that you would agree to have intimacy with this guy means that everything is over between us. It's all over between us. I turned and walked towards the stairs. She screamed, no, Donnie, no. I got to the top of the stairs, grabbed my bag that I had packed earlier, and walked up the back fire escape. I made the call and ran into the darkness, sobbing. While I was running, I still heard screams. About 20 minutes later, I heard a plane. It splashed down near the southern dock and swam up to me. My buddy, Todd Jacobs, was flying it. I was walking towards him when Plato and Simon appeared behind me. Plato shouted, oh no, you idiot, you can't escape. You should stay here and calm your wife down. He rushed at me. I was already at the pier. Plato was uncontrollable and in no condition to fight. Simon stayed away, perhaps because Todd had a gun pointed at him. I threw Plato into the water. He floundered there, shouting, "You're fired." Do you hear me? Fired. I boarded the plane, and Todd taxied. We flew to a small lake near Dulles. He had a car there for me. I paid him for the service and went home to Alexandria. The road was dark and lonely. Our house was also dark. I entered it. I looked around at photos of us in happier times, photos of our relatives. I was shocked and just sat in the chair, staring into space. That's how I fell asleep. At 8 in the morning, I was awakened by the sound of a car outside. I looked out and saw Erin getting out of some rental car. She carried her bag to the door, unlocked it, and went inside. I stood and looked at her, and she stood motionless, looking at me. She looked terrible, probably more than I could know, she said. In my entire life, I've never messed up like that, and I never will again. Never. I don't want to lose you, Donnie. I shrugged. Erin, what did you think would happen when you decided to let Plato use you? Did you think that I could not notice this because of Elle? I was stupid, Donnie, so stupid. Well, tell me, did you and Plato set all this up? She looked down. Not really. He suggested that when we get there, there might be a substitution, and to be honest, I foresaw this in advance. I thought I would say no, and that would be the end of it. But you didn't say no, you said yes, only if you go with Elle. I saw how much you wanted her, you were on edge being around her. And then, do you think we'd rekindle our marriage and have kids and all that when I knew? When we both knew that we couldn't trust each other? I saw it as a sideshow when we both would have an exceptional experience. I smiled. I can understand why you thought my experience with Elle would be top-notch, but why did you think that Plato would be better than me? He excited me. He is older and stronger, he knew what to do to get me. I never thought he would be better than you, just different. So, Erin, how do I know this won't happen again? There are still many guys like Plato in the world, and he is still around. I didn't mean to cheat, Donnie. Everything was right in front of you. I just thought you would agree. Now, well, that is, you refused her, so I know you would never agree since you turned her down. Yes, well, I do not know. To me, you are not the woman I met and married. She wouldn't move to be seduced by some other guy. Donnie, can we see what happens next? And you know we always had great intimate, we both miss it. We can continue like this while you spend your time not trusting me. She stood up and took off all her clothes. I thought about turning away, but I didn't. She led me upstairs. The only thing we have always had, and probably always will have, is complete intimate compatibility. As soon as we get into bed, we always get together. So I let her go home. 10 years later, I picked up the kids from the school bus. It was 3:15. Jessica is 8, and Robert is 6. Helen, who does not yet go to school, is 3 years old. I was a stay-at-home writer, but I had a good woman coming to help, and I had the opportunity to write. It took over a year before I trusted Erin enough to let her come off the pills, but when she did, our intimate life took off. The thought that I had knocked her up excited us greatly. I closed my contract with my previous publisher, Sally, and I moved on to something else. The first book I wrote was about adventures on an island. Everything was close to the truth. Well, so be it. I had to hang from the plane's float before getting on board after I beat up Simon and his henchmen. Well, and also the character's wife was pilled with illegal substances so that she would want the villain, but the villain was thrown into the ocean and all that. The book sold a huge number of copies, and I got a movie deal that also included my 3 previous books. Plato could not complain about half-truths in the new book, where he was cast in the role of Socrates. If he did, he would be burdened with the truth of what happened. Erin now has 2 stores, they earn some money. I earn a lot. Before I fully accepted her back, she signed a postnuptial agreement. It affects both of us. No infidelity. Now the school year has begun, and when I was driving the 2 older ones home, a car drove up to our entrance. This is a small red sports model. Out came a remarkable pair of legs, followed by the rest of the most beautiful woman in the world. Helen smiled and waved to the children. They ran up to her, shouting, "Aunt Helen! Aunt Helen!" She hugged them and began to fuss around. Young Helen greeted her at the door as she entered the house. I poured her a seltzer, her favorite drink, and said, "Aaron will arrive soon. I prepared a high-calorie salad, and everything is ready in your room." But that's a completely different story.
And now we'll have to stories. Decide which one is better.
This is a common story. Countless guys have been caught off guard by the unexpected turns of life, and I was no exception. Everything seemed perfect until it all fell apart. My name is Blake Ramsey, and at 31, life was pretty good. I had a full-time job at Space Conquest, part of a large aerospace company, where we worked on an exciting NASA project. I was responsible for developing a rescue system for a new manned spacecraft, a dream job for a space engineer. My wife, Tracy, and I had been happily married for 7 years, and we had 3 children, Tyler, 7, and twin girls, Beth and Emily, 6. Family was everything to me, and I always tried to balance work with a good rest. We were lucky to have our parents around who loved pampering their grandchildren, and Trace's sister, Lucy, was also a big part of our lives. We lived in a cozy neighborhood in a spacious 4-bedroom house and planned to convert the basement into additional living space when our daughters grew up. Tracy and I first met in college, where we quickly fell in love and got married. While I was studying aerospace engineering, Tracy worked as a paralegal. She took a break from work after the birth of our son, Tyler, but returned after the twins arrived. When our daughters started going to school, Trace's behavior began to change, revealing hidden problems in our relationship that I hadn't noticed before. Before the situation took a turn for the worse, I met Trace's boss, Stanley Cross, several times at social events and the company's Christmas party. I didn't feel much sympathy for him, considering him arrogant and rude, and I didn't trust him. Whenever I visited Tracy at work, I noticed that Cross was displaying possessive behavior and hesitated to let her leave. I kept a close watch for any signs of a romantic relationship between them, but at that moment, I didn't notice anything. The turning point came after the twins graduated from kindergarten. After leaving them at my parents' house for the weekend, I was looking forward to spending time alone with Tracy to focus on our relationship. When I arrived home, she was dressed to the highest standard, in a stunning short black dress, high heels, and flawless makeup. "Wow, you look incredible, baby," I exclaimed. If you had said we were going somewhere, I would have hurried home. I quickly refreshed myself and changed my clothes, ready to go wherever she had planned. But Trace's grin hinted at something else. "Actually, we're not going anywhere together," she said insidiously. "You'll go out, but not with you." I was stunned. "Wait, what do you mean?" Tracy explained that she had a date with her boss, Stanley Cross, and this was just the beginning. From now on, new rules are in place. Stan will pick me up tonight, and I won't be home today or tomorrow since we're renting a room downtown. He'll be back Sunday afternoon, she said. "What do you mean?" I exclaimed. "You need to calm down and accept this new arrangement," she replied. "Everything will be as it will be. I'm leaving, but I'll be back on Sunday afternoon." "It can't be," I protested. "If you're leaving, then don't come back." "I'll be back, Blake. We're still married, and I'm coming home. But you have to understand that I need more. If you complicate things, you'll leave on your own. Our children would be sad to see their father suffer financial ruin and go to jail. Let's sit down and discuss the necessary changes," she said. "It's best to settle this situation before Stan arrives, who will be here in about 30 minutes. Believe me, you wouldn't want him to have to interfere. If this jerk shows up in half an hour, he'll leave with a broken nose," I replied. "Don't do this, Blake," Tracy said firmly. "I'm explaining it for 2 reasons. First of all, you should listen to what he's capable of if you don't obey. And secondly, Max, his bodyguard, will be with him. It's better not to mess with Max. Touching Stan could lead to serious consequences," Tracy said. I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced since my time in the army in the Middle East. At first, I couldn't identify what it was, but then it dawned on me. I was ambushed. On one side was my wife, and on the other, Stanley Cross, who was about to arrive. I found myself in a difficult position. Careful planning and the element of surprise gave them an advantage, and I didn't know how to defend myself. I pushed past Tracy and headed upstairs. "Where are you going?" She asked. We really need to talk, she added. I just need to freshen up quickly. They'll be down in 5 minutes, I replied. During my service in the Middle East, I had been in 3 ambushes and developed several strategies for handling them. My first rule was to try to detect the ambush before it occurred, but with Tracy and Stanley, I was caught off guard. The second rule was to find shelter quickly, so I immediately went to my bedroom. As for the third rule, I knew I needed an escape plan for myself and my team, so I quickly began planning one while walking to my room. After changing out of my suit into more casual clothes, I set up my iPhone to record and put it in my pocket. Then, I went to my closet and rummaged through an old shoe locker. At the top, I found the key to my drawer glued to the back wall. When I opened it, I saw my old uniform, which surprisingly still fit me after 10 years. Beneath the uniform, I found folders with documents and a box with medals from my 2 business trips to the Middle East. After briefly skimming through the medals, I focused on what I was really looking for, my 9mm Marine Corps Beretta pistol, which I affectionately called Betsy. It was stored in a plastic pouch with a fabric lining and 2 clips of cartridges. Although technically, I shouldn't have kept the gun, the confusion surrounding my departure from the service allowed me to keep it. This weapon had great sentimental value because it saved my life countless times in battle. As I loaded the clip, I heard Tracy calling me from downstairs. You'll regret this when I come down, I thought. I strapped the weapon to my belt behind my back and hid it under my shirt. It was a double-action semi-automatic pistol, and if someone didn't actively look for it, they wouldn't notice it. Before leaving the room, I took out my phone, turned on the recording, and put it back in my pocket, making sure the camera was barely visible. I was determined to reveal Tracy and her boss intentions toward me. I decided to apply some of the interrogation techniques I had learned in the Marines. When I approached Tracy in the living room, she was sitting at the table with a glass of wine and beer, which prompted me to get straight to the point. Tracy, we need to talk before Stan gets here, I said. I could tell she had something on her mind, so I invited her to share her perspective on the situation. Tracy, tell me about this new reality I'm supposed to accept. She started by expressing her love for me and our family, but I interrupted her, insisting that she skip the sweet talk. I made it clear that I was neither sweet nor beloved to her, just Blake, and she was Tracy. Despite her annoyance, Tracy continued, saying that she and Stan had been having an affair for almost 7 months. Their relationship had gone from innocent flirting to intimate encounters, which began when he promoted her to executive secretary. She admitted that Stan's courtship had been flattering and that she was attracted to his power and attention. Tracy made it clear that this new reality needed to be accepted, otherwise there would be consequences. He was handsome, charming, and in great shape. It was hard to resist his attractiveness. We ended up on his couch, and he turned out to be a skilled lover. I liked it so much that I didn't want it to end, Tracy confessed. You didn't even think about the consequences and how much it would hurt me. I said, I'm sorry, Blake, but no, I wasn't thinking, she replied. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. You are the person I want to be with forever. I took a sip of beer and replied, good luck making it happen. Tell me, Tracy, why now, after 7 months of secrecy? I asked. She explained that they were tired of hiding their relationship and wanted to talk openly about it, including spending nights together and traveling as a couple. But they needed my agreement with their lifestyle. I took another sip of beer and thought about her words. Good luck to you, I said. Tracy bent down and tried to take my hands. No, Blake, we are not going to get divorced. We'll stay married. You just have to understand that Stan and I will be spending a lot of time together. They'll stay with him overnight a couple of times a week. We'll go on weekends, and maybe he'll even go on a longer vacation with him to Europe or the Caribbean as his personal assistant. I will travel with him, meet important people, attend business meetings and social events. Stan pays me well. It's going to be good for us, Tracy said. I couldn't help but think about the advantages of the current situation. Vacations, college funds for our children, and finally the renovated lake house we've always dreamed of. But then I hesitated. Do I really want Stanley's company to finance all this? Tracy quickly objected, stating that she was an integral part of Stan's law firm. She considered it an honor to be his mistress, and this position, in her opinion, was quite appropriate in a relationship with such an influential person like him. She tried to convince me that this affair would not last forever and that eventually we would return to a normal family life. She told me that Stan wanted to participate in our family's life and even offered to become an uncle to our children. Anger boiled inside me, but outwardly I kept my composure, refusing to let this man near my family. I asked why Stan, having his own marriage and the desire to have children, why does he want to interfere in our lives? Tracy explained that Stan's marriage was more of a marriage of convenience, and that his wife couldn't have children. He wanted to have his own inheritance, ideally a son and daughter. I offered surrogacy, but Tracy told me that Stan wanted any of his children to grow up in a loving family. Therefore, he was interested in taking care of our children. When Tracy looked down, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. God, it started, I muttered, feeling my anxiety grow as Tracy's words sank in. Suddenly, it dawned on me. He wants you to get pregnant, doesn't he? And then he expects me to raise his child. I realized out loud. Tracy quickly reassured me, saying it's not just going to be his baby. It's going to be our baby, and you will love him because you love me. In addition, the child will have the surname Cross. Stan will give us a lot of money to support the child and cover all expenses until he graduates from college. Thoughts flashed through my mind, and I stuttered, "Wait, are you pregnant already?" "No," she replied, "but he's been asking me to stop taking the pills for months." I told him that I wanted you to agree to our new arrangement first. It can't get any worse. I muttered to myself, "Good luck to you." Tracy was clearly angry. "Stop saying that." She snapped. "I know you don't agree right now, Blake, but maybe you'll come to your senses." Her words struck a chord. When I got up to address her, the doorbell rang. Tracy hurried to answer, letting her boss in. When he entered the room, he put his arm around her waist and kissed her on the lips. "The situation is only getting worse," I muttered to myself. "How did he react?" Cross asked Tracy. "Not very well," she replied. "You may have to talk about the consequences if he refuses to comply." I heard him say, "Then we'll move on to plan B." Shock and awe. Stan was a big man, taller than me. I couldn't figure out what Tracy saw in him. Perhaps his long, graying hair gave him a certain outstanding appearance. Confident in himself, in a black suit, he approached me with an imperious air, invading my personal space. "Mr. Ramsey, we need to talk," he said. "To talk? I will kill you," I replied. He calmly responded, "You can try, but my driver will most likely intervene before you can get far. And by evening, you'll be in jail. So sit down." When I looked out the door, I saw a big guy waiting at the threshold. Reluctantly, I sat down. "Great. Now we can talk like adults," he said. "When your wife became my personal assistant, it entailed additional responsibilities, including the closeness between us," he continued. "We've been together for 6 months now, and we're tired of walking the streets. You and Tracy will have a new agreement. As my assistant, she will take care of my needs, both professional and personal. You will still be her husband, but I will take care of her needs as well." He went on to say that most of their meetings would take place at the hotel or in his office, but sometimes they would take place in my bed when I wasn't around. Outraged, I declared I'd rather divorce her for treason. But he warned me of the consequences, threatening to destroy me in court and beyond. He painted a grim picture of losing everything, including custody of my children. Shocked and speechless, I sat in disbelief while he talked in detail about what he and Tracy were willing to do for their affair. In conclusion, he made it clear that any attempts to interfere would lead to serious consequences, ensuring that I would obey their new agreement. He leaned over to me and whispered, "Your wife is a great helper." I turned to Tracy, feeling shocked. "Are you really going to agree to all this?" I asked. "I hope not, Blake," she replied calmly, "but as long as you cooperate, I won't have to. Eventually, it will become the norm for you." Still digesting what had just happened, I watched them head for the door. But before they could leave, I wanted to tell them something else. "Wait, I have to tell you something important," I said. Stanley rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. "Tell me what's going on," he replied quickly. After a few drinks and reflecting on the state of my marriage, I took a deep breath. "I plan to call your wife and tell her everything," I said. I turned to Tracy. "Then I'll tell your sister Lucy to break the news to your parents." Stan, confused by the answer, asked what's going on. Without repeating myself, I informed him that on Saturday morning, I would change all the locks with the help of a locksmith. Now Tracy was completely focused, trying to figure out the situation. As soon as the locks are replaced, I plan to go to Kate's house nearby. I continued. Since her husband passed away a few months ago, she's been flirting with me shamelessly. She may be older than you and not a supermodel, but she has a great body. She even posed in a bikini for me once. I paused and added, an hour ago, I could not have imagined that I would be with someone else, but circumstances change, don't they? Tracy looked exhausted and spoke with difficulty. Blake, you can't do this, she said. I continued, informing them that when they returned on Sunday, all of Trass's belongings would be waiting for them in the front yard. Every single thing from clothes and shoes to cosmetics and jewelry. Even our wedding album would be there, and no, they wouldn't be neatly packed in bags. They'd have to hurry up and collect them before the sprinklers turn on at 4 a.m. on Monday. Stan's anger was palpable. His face turned red, and his fists clenched. It was clear his threats had no weight. Tracy looked visibly upset when I delivered the final blow. In meeting with the divorce lawyer on Monday, I informed them. They'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity, calling Stanley an accomplice. I will also sue him for interfering in our marriage and his firm for violating company rules. Even if the lawsuits are unsuccessful, they will tarnish his reputation. Stanley's reaction was explosive. He threw his bag against the wall and moved toward me, invading my personal space. He warned me about his power and influence as a well-known figure in the legal community, threatening to have me arrested by the time they checked into their hotel. Despite his bullying tactics, I was confident, not giving in to the urge to respond. I knew not to underestimate his ability to manipulate the law to his advantage. Stanley bragged about his connections in law enforcement and the district attorney's office, making it clear that he would stop at nothing to destroy me. Most of the judges in this city either owe me significant favors or know that I have incriminating information on them. Even politicians are indebted to me because I helped them in every possible way during their election campaigns, Stanley said, clearly on edge. I decided not to interfere. If you decide to go on a date with your friend Kate tomorrow, be prepared for the police to stop you and search your car for a trivial reason. It is likely that they will find something that could lead to an investigation into you. This is just the beginning of possible legal battles and financial difficulties that you may face, he continued. No lawyer would dare challenge me. You'll be left in ruins. Meanwhile, I'll be with your wife. Do you understand, you fool? Stanley turned his attention back to me. You have to show me respect. Address me as Sir or Mr. Cross. Call me by my first name again, and Max will teach you a lesson in manners. With that, he struck me twice with his right hand, but the second time, I quickly grabbed his hand with my left and bent all his fingers until they touched his wrist, holding them in place. Stanley was stunned and seemed to be looking at his hand in shock. Soon, pain shot through him, and he screamed in agony, falling onto the sofa. Tracy rushed to his aid as he clutched his injured arm to his chest, rocking back and forth in pain. You vile scoundrel, you will pay for this. I will make you suffer, he shouted, remembering his bodyguard waiting outside. He called out Max. Max, come here. The front door swung open, and Max came into the room, big and imposing, looking like a tough guy from an old movie from the 40s. Yes, Mr. Cross, he greeted. Stanley gestured at me with his uninjured hand and ordered, Take care of him, Max. Yes, Mr. Cross, Max replied, walking across the living room to me. Tracy tried to object, but Cross pushed her away. I foresaw a similar confrontation when Tracy said that Cross would bring his bodyguard. I knew that I might have to endure rough treatment. The situation was going to be difficult, especially considering that few people knew about my stay as a prisoner of war. It lasted only 17 days, but it was enough for me to receive a prisoner of war medal. During my captivity, I was the only American they captured, and they took out their anger on me. But I realized that I could withstand the difficulties. The real torture was when they hung me from a beam in the cell, and my hands were painfully tied behind my back. The torment was unbearable and endless. Therefore, compared to them, the beating was relatively easy. I stood my ground, offering no resistance when Max swung his massive arm at me. The blow landed on my nose, and I collapsed onto the coffee table, feeling disoriented. Max hesitated, not knowing if he should continue. He looked at Cross to get his opinion. "Hit him," Max heard him, Cross ordered. Max grabbed me by the hair, lifted me up, and hit me again, this time in my left eye. I fell down again, my vision blurred. Realizing that I was on the verge of a breakdown, I sarcastically remarked to Max, "You hit like a novice." Enraged by my comment, Max grabbed my hair again, preparing to strike, but he was caught off guard when I shot him in the leg, shocking everyone in the room. Max screamed in pain and staggered back, eventually landing in my favorite leather chair. I collapsed to the floor as he reached for another weapon, but I warned him, "Don't do this." Max, ignoring my words, continued to reach for the weapon, and I fired again. Max dropped his weapon and screamed in agony. I crawled up to him, disarmed him, and asked, "How many lives have you taken, Max?" Max pressed the gun to his temple and shook his head, making it clear that he had never killed anyone. I told him about my own experience of eliminating 27 people who were fighting for their beliefs, and then asked, "How much do you think I respect you?" Max shook his head again in defeat. I confirmed, "That's right, Max." "Not at all," I said. "I have no particular reason to keep you alive." Max pleaded, "I have a family." "Well, I have a family too, and you don't seem to care much about mine. Maybe your family would be better off if you disappeared." Max began to beg, "Please." Glancing at Max's shoulder, I noticed I shot you right in the shoulder joint. "Max, you're going to bleed out if I don't get you to a doctor within an hour or so. But don't worry, orthopedic surgeons can fix anything with all their plastic and ceramic bone substitutes they use. You may need to learn how to use your left hand for some things like eating, writing, or even shooting, but most likely, you'll have problems with the mobility of that arm for the rest of your life. And if you ever feel pain in that arm again, think of me. If I see you again, I'll assume you want to hurt me, and I won't hesitate to kill you. Do you understand?" Max nodded in understanding, wincing in pain as I examined his wound. "Oh, Max," I exclaimed in disappointment. "The bullet went through your shoulder and my cherished chair, leaving blood on it. I wasn't sure if I could clean up this mess or repair the damage." The thought of having to replace the chair made me even angrier. It was stupid to mess with Max for so long, and leaving such an enemy behind was an even bigger mistake. Trass's warning brought me back to reality just in time to see Cross swinging a fireplace poker in my head. Fortunately, my arm took the blow, but it broke my forearm in the process. Having no weapon, Cross made a move to grab my gun, but I quickly delivered a powerful blow to his groin, causing him to collapse in pain. I pulled out my 9mm pistol and held it down, demanding, "Open your mouth." Despite my order, Cross refused, pursing his lips and shaking his head in defiance. In response, I hit him hard, leaving a deep wound on his lip. I opened my mouth and forced the gun down his throat, making it difficult for him to breathe. I asked mockingly, "How do you like my version of shock and awe? Do you remember what I told Max? You probably know that I killed 27 people in battle. Before you start resisting, understand that this weapon requires only 4 ounces of pressure on the trigger, and I already have 2 ounces. I warned him. "So, where is your mobile phone?" I demanded. When Cross stopped resisting, he pointed to his left breast pocket, and I took out his phone. "Turn it on," I ordered. After making a thumbprint, Cross turned on the phone. "Now FaceTime your wife," I instructed. Cross' eyes widened as he complied. After a few calls, a woman answered. "Stanley, why are you calling me at this hour? And who is this?" she asked, alarmed by the appearance of an unfamiliar, beaten man. "Mrs. Cross," I began, "my name is Blake Ramsey. You may not know me, but most likely you know my wife, Tracy Ramsey, who works as your husband's personal assistant." "I know Tracy," Mrs. Cross confirmed. "What's going on? Why are you injured? And where is my husband?" I informed Mrs. Cross that I had her husband at gunpoint and tilted the phone to show her Cross face. "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "Please don't hurt him. Look, Mrs. Cross, we don't have much time. Your husband and my wife have been having an affair for several months now. They were planning to spend the weekend at a hotel today. When I objected, your husband ordered his assistant to beat me up. Unfortunately, I had to take action, and now your husband is next," I informed her. My husband should be at our residence in Palm Springs, working on this case, Mrs. Cross added. He's here in my house, Mrs. Cross, I said, pointing at Tracy, who was staring at the couch in fright. As you can see, my wife is already dressed and ready for a date with your husband, I remarked. It's unbelievable, Mrs. Cross replied. I was shocked too, I added. I have to go, Mrs. Cross. The police are coming soon. It was nice chatting, I said, ending the conversation. Turning to Cross, I said, I'm coming back to you. Expletive. Now your wife understands everything. What was your plan? Should I send Max and his friends to make fun of me? I asked, glancing at Max. Max needs to get some rest. I commented, giving him a warning look. Send everyone you want, and I'll take care of them before they help you. Okay, Cross nodded in understanding. Suddenly, an unpleasant smell filled the room. Did you expletive yourself? I teased, giggling. Now I need a new carpet. Hand me the briefcase, Tracy, I said, and she handed it over. I took out my laptop and pointed to the hard drive. Is all your important data here? I asked. Cross screamed, covering his ear. Apparently his eardrum had burst. Then I moved away from Cross and told him to sit on the couch. He obeyed, despite still clutching his groin and ear. I told Tracy to get a wet towel from the kitchen to help Max with his bleeding shoulder. She hurried off and quickly returned to help Max. After making sure everyone was seated, I asked them to stay put and went to the kitchen to clean up while the phone continued to record. Realizing how important it was to hide the recording so the police wouldn't delete it because of cross connections, I quickly hid the phone in a stack of dish towels in a drawer. After wiping my face with a damp towel, I returned to the living room. Cross was in pain, and Tracy was helping Max. I told them to wait for the cops, who would be coming with an ambulance soon. My neighbors heard a noise in the street, and 2 of them had already called 911. Among my neighbors was retired Marine Colonel Orson Sage, a close friend with whom I often drank beer. He affectionately called me Captain, and I called him Colonel. Are you okay, Captain? He asked. I've had better days, I replied, just as sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the imminent arrival of the police. I turned to the Colonel for help. Colonel, could you lend me a hand? He readily agreed and went out onto the porch. Could you help me unload these pistols and put them on the table? I wouldn't want to hold one of them in my hands when the police arrive, I explained. The Colonel quickly took the cartridge out of the gun and put everything on the table on the porch. Kate, a widowed neighbor from the next street, saw my wounds and came to help. Turning to the Colonel and Kate, I expressed my desire to explain everything, but noted that time was limited. My wife's boyfriend had threatened to give me pills, I explained. I gave the Colonel the keys and asked him to hide my car if the garage wasn't cordoned off. The garage code is the address of our street, I added. Understood, Captain, he replied. Kate noticed. Blake, you look really bad. I confessed. My head is splitting, and it feels like I was hit harder than I thought. With Kate's help, I sat down on the upper steps just as 2 police cars with flashing lights and sirens pulled up. They approached cautiously, holding weapons in their hands, but the Colonel assured them that there was no threat, pointing to the unloaded pistols on the porch. I informed them about the 3 people inside. The officer noticed my condition and said, "It looks like you need medical attention soon." 2 ambulances arrived with flashing lights and sirens, and emergency specialists hurried to the porch. Another officer informed them about the wounded man inside. When my dizziness got worse, Kate asked me to lie down while the paramedic examined my face. I mentioned a possible fracture in my forearm. A few days later, I saw Max being carried out on a stretcher and Cross being helped into an ambulance. Tracy was accompanied by a female officer as they passed me. Tracy sobbed and apologized, but I coldly waved her away, saying sharply, "Go to hell, Tracy," after which she was taken away. Soon after, I either lost consciousness or was given painkillers and fell into a deep doze for 3 days. When I woke up, I was greeted by a nurse named Rose, sitting alone in the ward. I examined my injuries, a cast on my right forearm, bandages on my left eye and nose. Despite these wounds, I looked in stable condition, surrounded by medical equipment that monitored my condition. After Dr. York sedated me for a possible mild concussion and gave me something to help me sleep, I woke up to find my left wrist handcuffed to the bed railing. Detective Sergeant Hartman informed me that I had been arrested on several charges, including trespassing and using a weapon, because my wife and 2 other people had filed complaints against me. Rose later confirmed that she was aware of the situation. Dr. York assured me of my recovery and informed me that I would be transferred to a new department. A few days later, a lawyer named Sam Wilson came to see me and offered to plead guilty in order to negotiate with the district attorney. I said I was innocent and asked about my children, who were under the care of my wife's sister. The sudden upheaval in my life made me worry about my crumbling marriage, the well-being of my children, and my job. I gave Sam my company's contact information and asked him to inform my boss about the situation. After reviewing the charges against me, I questioned the charge of spousal abuse mentioned by Detective Sergeant Hartman. Sam explained that Stanley Cross had reported numerous cases of cruelty toward Tracy, backed up by photographs of her injuries. Despite my protests, Sam suggested that we consider pleading guilty at the time of the arraignment to mitigate the severity of the charges. However, I hesitated, fearing the possible consequences of admitting guilt. In preparation for the upcoming litigation, I asked Sam to contact my uncle, Jonathan Allen Carter, a retired naval lawyer known for his expertise in family law. I stressed the need for confidentiality in order to prevent premature disclosure of my plans. After consulting with his uncle, Jack agreed to provide legal assistance while emphasizing the importance of keeping the details of the case secret. During the trial, which was broadcast on hospital television, I pleaded not guilty to all charges. Despite the prosecutor's request to deny bail, the judge decided to keep me in the hospital for 2 more days before the hearings began, which would decide whether I would go to court or be sent to prison. Before I was sent to prison, Jack, who was now my official lawyer, visited me. It was a huge relief to see him, and hugging him made me feel very emotional. Until that moment, I didn't realize how much I needed support. After our meeting, Jack got down to business. He wanted to talk to me alone and shared some important details. He spoke briefly with Lucy and assured me that the children would be fine with her until everything settled down. Lucy was confused by Tracy's account of what had happened and was grateful for Jack's support. Jack was interested in the details of how I ended up in such a predicament. I opened up to him, telling him about the events that had happened. He was shocked by my story. I also shared with him a fabricated story that Stanley Cross, Angel, and Tracy had created after my arrest. In a low voice, I informed Uncle Jack that I had recorded everything on video using my iPhone, which was safely hidden at home. Although he remained calm, I sensed a glimmer of relief in him, realizing that there might be evidence supporting my version. Jack assured me of his continued support in this difficult situation. He advised me to focus on my recovery while he handled my case and explored bail options. I agreed and asked him to look after my children. He assured me that he would keep in touch through Lucy. After being discharged from the hospital, I was escorted to prison. 3 days passed without any messages from Jack. In the end, I appeared before the judge, and Jack was by my side. He argued for my bail, but instead, I was placed under house arrest. Jack rented an apartment for me in a gated community, where I was supposed to live with him, but I was not allowed to leave the premises. Jack devised secret plans, revealing them only as they were implemented. He enlisted the help of private detectives to follow up on various leads. An obstacle in the form of an injunction prevented me from retrieving my phone from the kitchen drawer, which was a serious problem. Despite this, Jack decided not to break down the door, but to wait for the decision to come by itself. At that time, he set up a new account on his mobile phone so that both of us could stay in touch. I contacted my neighbor, the Colonel, to keep him informed of my circumstances. The Colonel discussed with Jack what was going on around my house. Jack suggested inviting the Colonel to his place for beers, steaks, and a barbecue to understand this issue more deeply. The Colonel told about the incident he witnessed. Shortly after the quarrel, he saw some people near my garage, called the rescue service, and went out to them with an aluminum bat. Despite the threats, they fled in a black SUV, and their faces were captured in a photo. The Colonel also mentioned that when he returned to the house, he saw Tracy talking to some men near the garage. After recording the license plate of the SUV, Jack conducted a small investigation. He found out that the license plate was linked to Unique Services, a private detective firm owned by Jose Gonzalez and Miguel Ortega, who had questionable backgrounds in law enforcement. Interestingly, among the clients of Unique Services was the law firm of Stanley Cross. I urgently needed to retrieve my mobile phone from the kitchen in the house. Jack came up with a plan to meet with Tracy under the pretext of mediation, which should be attended by her lawyer's assistant at 6 o'clock in the evening. Jack arrived at the place, where he was warmly welcomed by Tracy and Gordon Merritt from Cross's law firm. After they met, they gathered in the family room to discuss issues, and both recorded the conversation. Jack expressed regret and subtly questioned my version of events. In particular, my claim that Tracy and Mr. Cross were having an affair and my angry reaction to seeing them together. Mr. Merritt entered the conversation, saying that the evidence was not in my favor. Jack then invited Mr. Merritt to testify about my mental state during the incident, emphasizing my belief that Mr. Cross was trying to take Tracy away. He also stressed that I was a good husband and father. Upon reflection, Mr. Merritt offered to consider such an offer if I pleaded guilty to the charges against me. Jack asked if some of the charges could be mitigated or dropped, to which Mr. Merritt replied that he needed to discuss it with Mr. Cross, as he had influence in the district attorney's office. Perhaps we can find a solution to make this situation disappear. Not only is it good for Mr. Ramsey, but it's also not the best option for Mr. Cross to get involved in a high-profile lawsuit. This undermines his reputation and business. That's the main reason I came here to tell you. Tracy, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Blake wanted me to convey his love and longing for my children, Jack said. Tracy seemed touched by this, and tears welled up in her eyes before turning off the recording device. Jack warned of the consequences if he could prove my words. If I can prove the falsity of your testimony, you may be charged with perjury and obstruction of justice, which could result in imprisonment, Jack said. Just as Gordon Merritt was about to speak, Jack turned his attention to him. As for you, counselor, if I can prove that you were aware of the misleading actions of your client, you may also face legal consequences. Please take some time to discuss this before responding, Uncle Jack said, taking the recorder and leaving. While you're conferring, may I get some water? He asked. Of course. Go ahead, Jack. The kitchen is in that hallway over there. Tracy pointed to the door leading to the dining room. In the kitchen, Jack made sure he wasn't visible and retrieved my iPhone from the drawer by the sink. Picking up the phone, he poured himself a glass of iced water and returned to the family room. Tracy, do you have anything to add before I leave? He asked. Tracy nervously looked at Gordon Merritt, who spoke on her behalf, saying that they had no further comments at the moment and would inform Mr. Carter of any changes regarding the accusations against me, hoping for my help in resolving the issue. Jack agreed, thanked Tracy for the meeting, and informed Mr. Merritt that he would see him in court. Instead of returning the iPhone to the townhouse, Jack arranged for Digital Analysis Solutions, DS, to examine its contents. He informed the DS director about the case and emphasized the importance of the video and audio recordings for my defense. DAS assured Jack that they would conduct a thorough analysis and provide their findings in a few days. Later, Jack and I went to the DS office to retrieve their report. DAS transferred all the data from my iPhone to their server, made several copies of the videos for safekeeping, and saved them on DVDs, flash drives, and in the cloud. Watching the video for the first time, Jack and I saw all the conversations leading up to the incident, including Max's attack, which clearly showed that I was acting in self-defense. Although some moments were visually unclear, the audio recording effectively conveyed what had happened. Fortunately, the audio also recorded Max pointing a gun at me. As soon as we decided the briefing was over, the DS director mentioned there was still something to discuss. In addition to the usual contents of my phone, photos, contacts, emails, and messages, there were 97 new emails and 64 unread text messages. DAS scanned them without opening them, and most turned out to be genuine messages from friends and relatives, but one message seemed suspicious. It contained 27 photos of children. If I accessed it, the photos would be on my phone. Upon realizing the situation, I concluded that Cross must have tried to place these photos on my phone. Uncle Jack and I thanked DS for their help and left the phone with them, taking copies of the video home. Later, Jack seemed lost in thought. "What are you thinking, Jack?" I asked. I'm considering our next steps, he replied. We could present this to the district attorney now and maybe get the charges dropped against you. Cross, Max, and Tracy may be in trouble, but if Cross has the necessary influence, the situation could be resolved. I've considered other options. We could wait until the hearing. The prosecutor will most likely call all the participants in the conspiracy to testify, and then we'll be able to present our version of events. The district attorney will have grounds to charge them with conspiracy, perjury, and other crimes, which could lead to significant prison sentences, Jack said. It occurred to me that I could regain custody of the children. What is your decision? He asked. We can either get this case over with quickly, or we can have a long trial accusing them all of a large conspiracy. Without hesitation, I expressed my willingness to confront them. I've always wanted to publicly expose them and present the case in court like Perry Mason, I added. Jack admitted it amused him that even an experienced lawyer like him had strange aspirations. We were looking forward to the hearing scheduled in 3 weeks, and Jack was diligently preparing his case, warning against revealing our trump card, the video, too early to prevent it from being suppressed by the prosecution. A week before the hearing, Jack had to return home to San Francisco on other business. During his absence, the security guard at the entrance called me and informed me that Tracy Ramsey, who claimed to be my wife, had arrived. After consulting with Jack, who advised me to remain calm and respectful, I allowed Tracy to enter, despite the fact that she had confessed her toxic attitude towards me. Come on in, Tracy, I greeted. You look great. Thank you, Blake, she replied. You look very fit and handsome, she added. I told her that I regularly worked out in the gym and monitored my diet, mainly sticking to fruits and vegetables while avoiding harmful foods. Tracy confessed her love to me and expressed regret for the way things had turned out. I never thought it would turn out like this, she said. I replied, You wanted me to adopt Cross' lifestyle, didn't you? You thought you were going to have fun with him, and we could make good money. Tracy admitted that these plans were more aligned with Cross's vision and that none of them expected my strong reaction. It wasn't like you, considering how calm and easygoing you usually are, she remarked. Maybe that's why he thought I was easy to manipulate, I suggested. Tracy admitted that she was horrified to see how violent I had become. This is a side of me that I've been trying to bury since I served in the military, I explained. I wasn't like that anymore. When she asked about my car, I explained that I had moved it to a safer place after Cross threatened to plant false evidence there. Tracy then told me that the men in the house were planning to plant evidence in my car, but she didn't want to go through with it. I begged her to tell the truth to the district attorney to clear my name, but she said she couldn't do it because of Stanley's influence. Feeling helpless, I noticed the charge of assault and asked her, Judging by the photos, you have cuts and bruises. I didn't raise my hand against you. Did Stanley do it? As soon as you left, he immediately came up with another story, she replied. According to him, you accused us of having an affair and then attacked me when he intervened. A scuffle ensued. He claims that you broke his nose, gave him a black eye, and shot Max before he could help. To make his story more convincing, he also hit me several times. Tracy confessed with tears in her eyes, I'm so sorry, Blake. I never wanted any of this to happen. I just want us to get back to what we had. It's impossible, I said firmly. There's a way out, Blake, Tracy insisted earnestly. Stanley knows about your past and that you're struggling with mental health. He wants you to plead guilty on these grounds. He thinks he can use his connections to send you to a treatment facility for veterans. After that, we could start over, just the two of us and the kids. It became clear that her intention was to convince me to accept a guilty plea and commute the sentence. I pretended to consider her offer. It sounds promising, Tracy, but I need time to think about it, and I need to discuss this with Jack. He wasn't very successful in finding evidence in my favor. Do it for yourself, Blake, she urged. For the sake of us and the children, we'll be able to put all this in the past in a few years. I doubt it very much, I replied. You cheated on me, wanted me to accept your betrayal, threatened to take my children away, and now you're setting me up. It's not just a small obstacle. Tracy tearfully begged, but I interrupted her, ending the conversation. I suggested that she leave, but she insisted on staying, offering to forget about our problems for a while. That's not going to happen, Tracy, I said firmly. Tracy understood my position and asked me to think about Stanley's offer before I walked her to the door. When she hugged me goodbye, it felt sincere, but I didn't reciprocate. The hearing was supposed to determine if I would stand trial, and the prosecution looked confident. During the hearing, Cross, Max, and Tracy acted as witnesses, each sticking to their rehearsed stories. Jack questioned them briefly, asking if their statements were true, and they all confirmed them. He also wanted to interrogate Jose and Miguel, but their involvement in framing me was considered irrelevant to my accusations, and the attempts were unsuccessful. When the prosecution was over, Jack asked to provide the video as proof of my innocence. With the court's permission, the assistant district attorney objected, citing the fact that the evidence was new. Jack gave an explanation, stating that there were concerns that his client may be biased. The judge asked for evidence of bias, and Jack pointed to the video. The judge offered to watch the video in the office, but Jack refused, expressing distrust of the impartiality of the court. The judge continued to insist, asking if there were allegations of corruption against the court. The judge asked if Jack could provide evidence to support his claim or if it was contained only in the video. Jack confirmed that the evidence was indeed contained in the video, but asked for an opportunity to explain his point of view in more detail through questions. Jack explained that, in his opinion, by asking a few questions, he would be able to demonstrate the court's biased attitude towards his client. The judge allowed Jack to continue asking questions on the condition that, if he couldn't prove his point of view, the video would be reviewed privately for admissibility. Jack warned that if the video was not allowed in court and I was found guilty based on the testimony of prosecution witnesses, he would share it with the media. He also suggested that the video might raise doubts about the integrity of the judge who did not present it in court. The judge felt threatened by Jack's words, but Jack quickly turned the conversation in another direction, mentioning that the judge's eldest son was studying at college. "Is he enrolled in the Air Force Academy?" asked Jack. "Yes," the judge confirmed. "He's a freshman. Getting into the Air Force Academy is quite difficult, isn't it?" Jack continued. The judge agreed. "Initially, your son had to apply through a congressman or senator, then take the civil service exam after his candidacy was approved by 9 other candidates. He passed medical tests, aptitude tests, and an exam in addition to his other tests. Is that all accurate, Your Honor?" "Yes," the judge replied. "He did well in high school and was a member of the swimming team. You should be proud of him, Your Honor." Jack admitted, "I'm sure you are." "Get to the point, Mr. Carter," the judge demanded. "Did your son's application include 3 letters of recommendation?" Jack asked. "Yes, Mr. Carter," the judge replied. "And who wrote those letters, Your Honor?" Jack pressed. The judge paused before answering. "The authors of 2 letters were his swimming coach and his math teacher," he explained. "And who wrote the 3rd letter?" "Mr. Stanley Cross wrote a brilliant recommendation for the Air Force Academy," the judge said. "Mr. Cross must have known your son well, unless he made up the details," Jack remarked. "My son had an internship at Mr. Cross' office during the school holidays. He dreams of becoming a lawyer," the judge said. "So Mr. Cross is more of a professional acquaintance than a family friend?" Jack asked. "He is my friend and colleague in some of the legal groups that I belong to," the judge clarified. "Now you understand why the defense doubts your impartiality," Jack concluded. "You have questioned my honesty," the judge replied, although he added, "Any connection with Mr. Cross would not have influenced my decisions. But you have made it a matter of perception." At that moment, the lights went out and the screens went down. Jack whispered to me, "Well, Blake," before turning on the video in court. When the video showed Cross's ties to law enforcement, the atmosphere in the courtroom tensed, and the assistant district attorney left in tears. In another video, Cross, Max, and Tracy tried to leave, but were stopped by the judge. The 3rd video caught everyone by surprise. It captured Tracy's involuntary confession, recorded on a hidden iPhone. In response, the meeting was adjourned so that the assistant prosecutor could familiarize himself with the new evidence. When the court reconvened, 3 prosecution witnesses were absent, and the district attorney appeared instead. Without hesitation, he appealed to the court, stating that all charges against me were dropped because, in their opinion, I acted in self-defense against Mr. Cross and Mr. Angel, and my aggressive actions were justified. In addition, arrest warrants were issued for Mr. Stanley Cross, Mr. Max Angel, and Mrs. Tracy Ramsey for various offenses such as conspiracy, perjury, and obstruction of justice. An attempt by Mr. Cross to plant false evidence against me was exposed, and the involvement of Mr. Angel and Tracy was also noted. Efforts were made to detain 2 more people involved in these schemes. Although Stanley Cross, Max Angel, and Tracy were initially taken into custody, they were later released. The district attorney was furious to learn that his office had been influenced by Stanley Cross for many years and launched an investigation to root out colleagues associated with him. All the defendants were found guilty. Max and Tracy confessed against Stanley, and he received 11 years in prison. Max got 7, and Tracy received 3 years, which was reduced to 2 after her warning about the attack Cross plan sounded in my testimony. Jose and Miguel were charged with obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence as a result of their involvement with the videos. They were arrested for possession of videos involving minors. Cross was being held in the county jail, awaiting transfer to a state prison, and Max and Tracy were given 2 weeks to settle their cases before surrendering. Max was preparing the family for his absence, hoping for parole in 4 years, and Tracy, having received a shorter sentence, agreed to serve her time in a rural facility that Jack had arranged. I allowed Tracy to stay with the children to give her a chance to bond with them and explain her upcoming absence. The day before she was to leave, Tracy asked me to visit her. When I arrived, she greeted me warmly, saying, "This is your home." She was dressed casually but decently, with a small bag by the door that, as she joked, had everything she needed. Tracy made a light breakfast in the kitchen, and we discussed that Lucy would come to take her to the sheriff's office at 11 in the morning. She assured me that Lucy would help with the children and encouraged me to accept her help. Tracy wanted me to settle in before the kids returned from school to avoid disrupting their routine. She expressed uncertainty about life in the facility, but promised to write often and encourage the children to do the same. Her belongings were packed in plastic containers and stored in the basement, and a family photo was left in each child's room so they wouldn't forget her. Tracy mentioned that she had recently bought a new double bed with fresh sheets and blankets for the master bedroom, which remained unused. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes, and it became clear that we still had to address our personal relationship. When she started tidying the table, I suggested we go to the family room and have coffee. Glancing at her watch, she realized time was running out and expressed deep remorse. Tracy admitted she was wrong and apologized for her actions, recognizing me as an exceptional husband, father, and provider. She acknowledged that she had forgotten the strong partnership we once shared and regretted allowing outside influence to affect her decisions. In that moment, the reflection of the woman I had married was before me again. "I am fully responsible for the consequences of my actions," she said. "Despite the influence I was under, I made choices that led me down the wrong path. I feel great shame. It's hard for me to look you in the eye. Part of me wants to escape to a place where I don't have to face you. I understand that you'll never forget, but I hope with time the pain will lessen, and you'll find the strength to forgive me. That's what I'm holding on to now." Tracy finished speaking, wiped away her tears, and then stood up to offer me more coffee. I hugged her tightly as she stood in front of me, tears streaming down her face. We shared a heartfelt embrace. When Tracy heard Lucy's car horn honking, she knew it was time to leave. Wiping away her tears, she packed her things and confessed her love to me before she left. I stayed behind, sorting out my thoughts. Later, Lucy called to offer her support, and I gratefully accepted, knowing that we needed to discuss parenting together without Tracy. I took on the responsibility of being a single dad, caring for Tyler, Beth, and Emily. Lucy was incredibly supportive in taking on the role of a mother. After about a month, she and the children went to visit Tracy. Lucy returned delighted by the visit, speaking about the welcoming visiting area. 3 months later, I finally visited Tracy myself. She looked cheerful, especially when talking to the children, but deep down, she still carried a heavy sense of regret. During one of these visits, I met Tracy's friend, Candy, who had made past mistakes but also expressed regret for her actions. A year passed, and Tracy was nearing the consideration of parole. Jack suggested she take online courses in law at the University of Virginia, believing that legal experience was a promising career path. Tracy agreed and signed up for the course. Meanwhile, Lucy and I were looking for a suitable place for Tracy to live upon her release. We found a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse with a garage, conveniently located near the courthouse and law offices. We bought it with the expectation that Tracy would eventually pay us back. On the day of Tracy's release, Lucy picked her up alone due to paperwork requirements. When they arrived at their new home, Tracy was overjoyed and shed tears. Both our families were there to greet her, as well as Jack and his wife. The children gave Tracy a tour of the house and cooked dinner for her on the terrace. After settling into the house, Tracy expressed her gratitude to everyone for accepting her despite her past. Jack had arranged interviews for her at various law firms, and she was grateful for his constant support. After Tracy found a place at the law firm Jack recommended, she invited me to have dinner with her. She cooked my favorite dish, meatloaf with potatoes and peas. Throughout dinner, we avoided discussing the past and instead focused on conversations about the children, work, and the weather. After dinner, we retired to the family room, where Tracy turned on soft music playing in the background. "I asked you to come over tonight, Blake," she began, "because I want to discuss our future, or rather, the future of our relationship. What do you think about where we're going?" "I'm not sure what the future holds for me, Tracy," I replied. "I don't have a crystal ball to predict it. But here's what seems most likely to me. We will continue to raise our children together as a team. They rely on both of us equally. Your return home has made my duties much easier, and I have some free time now. I'm sure you will also appreciate the opportunity to be alone without the constant presence of children. Unlike you, I lead a fairly active social life. It's nice to go out for dinner or a movie sometimes. When you get used to it, I think you'll enjoy a more active social life too. Blake, have you ever dreamed of a permanent reconciliation with me?" Tracy asked. "If you mean remarriage, the answer is no. Too much has happened for me to marry you again," I replied. "But I've left the past in the past and expect to maintain friendly relations without any romantic attachments. That's as close as we'll ever be." Tracy looked down, tears in her eyes. "I didn't think this would happen, but I had to ask. I think in the future, I will become more sociable and maybe start a serious relationship." I reflected. "Someday I will meet someone special who I can love and ask to marry me. It doesn't matter if she is single, divorced, or widowed, with or without children. I'll find someone. The same goes for you," I assured Tracy. "When you get used to your new life, you will most likely also find someone who may ask you to marry him. But that doesn't mean we won't keep in touch. We will always have our children to bring us closer. We will celebrate birthdays, holidays, and maybe even vacations together. There will be graduations and weddings in the future. This is the best we can hope for in terms of being together," I said. Tracy remarked sadly, "Maybe it's more than I deserve, but I can accept such a future." Before I left, Tracy expressed gratitude for the way I treated her. After returning home, she admitted that I could have easily shut her out and kept the kids away, but I didn't. "You are not who you were," she said. "It just makes me feel even more sorry for what I did to you." As I opened the door to leave, I assured her, "You may not have noticed, Tracy, but I've forgiven you. I don't hold a grudge against you, and I hope that in time you will be able to forgive yourself." Tracy replied, "Maybe someday, but not anytime soon." We hugged and stood there for a few minutes without speaking. Then I let her go, stepped out into the fresh air, got into the car, and drove home in silence.